Hola, hello, buenas a todos. It's the Chancleta Generation Podcast. Hey, ladies, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So welcome back, everyone. I am Clemencia. And I own this agency called Moira Studio, and it's an advertising agency that speaks to Latinos in the U.S.
And I'm Cecilia del Cid, and I'm an environmental and social justice practitioner, an immigrant from Guatemala, community weaver, also working in media. How are you doing, Clem?
Great. And today, back for some more goodness, we have Lucia Caldera. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, you guys.
So, for those of you who didn't listen to our last episode,
Go listen to it.
Listen to it, but just in case, Lucia is a writer who specializes in personal finance, and her goal is to create approachable content that sparks financial wellness and unlocks personal growth. Yes, Lucia's work reflects her passion for financial education as the key to reducing the wealth gap for women and minorities. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, Mama Chancleta. So, today's topic, and as usual, it's something that not many Latinos talk about or is not on the radar. And that is building generational wealth, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And I know that maybe like this is sort of like a buzzword and it kind of gets thrown around and but maybe some people just don't really know what it means. So, and also like when people hear wealth, it's like, oh, how to become rich in 5 minutes or whatever. No, none of that. So, Lucia, why don't you kind of define for us what is wealth and also what is generational wealth?
Yeah, and it's okay if people don't know. I gotta say, I worked in finance for more than 10 years in financial planning, and I don't think that it's something that I actually really grasped until probably about 5 years ago or 7 years ago. And like I said, it's fine because we don't really tend to talk about it much in our culture. And I think it's a great place to start by defining the difference between richness and wealth, right? So richness is, the way I see it, is just it's money in the bank. It's cash, it's, dollars. That's it. Wealth is something more. It's your assets, it's what you own, it's your resources, you can think of it as your legacy, what you're gonna leave behind. And in my opinion, it's more than, just money. It's properties, it's an education, it's values, it's everything. It's your legacy.
Business.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
and I have to say, I was just gonna mention that in English, at least, we have two languages. We have richness and we have wealth. In Spanish, the same word will be used for the two words. I think we would use riqueza. And we maybe can call it like riqueza generacional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really not like you don't have to be rich to have wealth.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
No, you have to be wealthy. You can be rich and you might not be wealthy, but if you're wealthy, you're rich.
Yes, absolutely. I had to think about that one for a second, but yes.
I know. It was like, that meme with the little algebra equations around, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Well, and there's a lot of this is so emotional and intangible that it's, sometimes it takes a second to wrap your head around those nuances. But I think it's really interesting, Ceci, that you mentioned the word and the definition in Spanish, because one of the things that I think is really important is to change your language around money. You know, when you're trying to build generational wealth, changing your language also helps you change your emotions. And so the words that you use to refer to money, to speak about money, reflect a lot of what's going on subconsciously. And so when you make that difference, like you define that difference between richness and wealth, it's the beginning of a process, I think, of building generational wealth.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of taboo around talking about money, right? You know, people don't want to talk about how much they make, or like, you know, a lot of I think we mentioned this before. A lot of the issues, like arguments that families and relationships have, is over money, and so they just rather not talk about it because they don't want to argue with their loved ones. So there's a lot of, you know, taboo and also just like tension around talking about money.
Yeah, I think it's also generational. I feel like previous generations didn't talk about it, whereas now I think the younger generations are a lot more transparent about finances in general, and, you know, maybe like the reality of your home, or the reality of your personal financial situation, any debt that you might have, any goals that you have. People are a lot more open to talking about it, and I think that also sets the first steps towards building generational wealth. I think that there's a lot of fear that you have to overcome, and a lot of limiting beliefs that you may bring along with you. So healing those money wounds is really the start of it all. For many people, it's really challenging, but once you start talking about it, then you start to take action, right? A lot of times, if we don't talk about things, we don't do anything about it. It's kind of like it's not there. But if you talk about it, then you start to take action, you know, little by little. It's like they say, practice, practice, practice. If you want to get good at anything, you have to start taking action and building that muscle. But it all starts with dealing with your fears that you may have around it first. And then, you know, you take baby steps, and you start with something simple, like maybe, you know, for some people, it's even difficult to open up their bank statements or their credit card statements. They'd rather just like not know, or, you know, pay the minimum, and like not maybe take a few moments to do the math and think about how it really affects you in the longer term if you pay more than your minimum, for example, to your credit card bill every month, right? So all of these things are the first steps towards dealing with the emotional baggage that you may have with money, and then really be ready, be in a good place for you to set the next generation up for wealth.
Yeah, and I mean, from personal experience, from my friends and like, you know, my family, this whole building wealth for the next generations is kind of like a new thing, you know. It's like, you know, in our culture, it sort of used to be the opposite, right? Like the retirement plan for a couple were their children. That was their. So it's like they just raise children to have jobs, and then ultimately they will be the ones taking care of them. And that's like back home, right? Like back in our like countries of origin. However, the US is different, right? Like the culture is different. And so, you know, kids like Latino kids that were born here or they were raised here, they were raised under a very different way of thinking. You know, it's like the parents actually want to leave something for their children, or they just don't want to burden them with having to take care of them. This is like the American way of thinking. And it's, you know, it's not just like the American way of thinking, it's like sort of the more modern Western world way of thinking. And so it's kind of like, you know, there's gotta be like this huge shift in the conversation. You know, I know, you know, I've had many friends that their parents are like, well, what are you gonna do for me, you know, when we get old? Like, what are you gonna, you know, where are you gonna put me up? And it's like, it's a huge amount of pressure, for kids that are like first generation, and like, for example, kids that is their first, that they're the first person to go to college in their whole family, to have this pressure of, having to support, either an entire family or their parents when they are older, which, as Latinos, as like our culture, we will of course do it, and we will break our backs trying to do it. But it's like, do you really want your kids to have that pressure? Why can't we change that conversation? And like, there's a lot of healing to do around that.
I was gonna say, I partially agree with you. I think that the Latinos that
you usually partially agree with me.
I think that, just thinking of having worked with like first generation Latino or like marginalized identity students, we do carry a lot of that. Like, I think that idea, a lot of our cultures, not just Latin America, other immigrant communities, do believe that education is a way in which you will move socially up. So it used to be a way in which you could really access to education would eventually grant you access to upward social mobility. Mm-hmm. It's no longer that way. I think that just looking at the conversation going about education in this country today with the Supreme Court, and you can really think about how much our first generation students are burdened with a lot of debt in college. So education no longer is that. But I also think that I cannot look at an America and think that there is no idea of generational wealth. I think it might be a generational shift. A lot of people looked and tried to buy land. And I think that a lot of people in our countries will try to have un terrenito, something. Not everyone had access, but and because with neocolonial policies and capitalism, you don't have that access anymore. But I think a lot of people, even in minority communities, even if I think of indigenous communities in Guatemala, which is my experience, I would think that people would do the effort to try to have something. And it used to be this idea that, which is also not quite accurate, but like people will divide. They will get like a parent would have a piece of land, and then they will divide it amongst 8 children, and everyone will end up with this like mini fundio, right? So I don't think that we really don't have the idea of building generational wealth. I think that systems for a long time have worked to really disenfranchise certain classes to accumulate it, and approved a lot of other classes, or made it very easy for other classes to do so. So I agree with you partially that we as Latinos or as first generation students or sometimes think like, how am I going to support my parents who have done so many sacrifices to bring me here or to offer me other opportunities? But I don't think it's that we didn't think about it in our countries or here. I do think that because if someone can stretch $1 is poor and working class people. So I just think that the system is not built for that for us.
Yeah, I think it's also about thinking about it differently, right? So like a lot of times when people buy land in our countries or a family is able to buy a home, it's kind of like the family home and it's staying with us for generations and generations. Here, it's very different. It's, people will, for example, when there's generational wealth, the parents will buy their kids their first condo, house, right? And then from there, the kids will take that and they'll sell it when it goes up in value, and they move on to a bigger home. And that's kind of how people think about building wealth in this country, I feel. Whereas for us, it's more like, oh, we have this and now it's ours and it stays in the family forever. And hopefully we're not going to lose it at some point, right? I think that's always also a fear that's in the back of people's mind. We don't have... And it's also super normal, of course, as immigrants, there's always that insecurity. So you don't really necessarily have that sense of like abundance or, there's going to be more for us. There's enough for everybody here. We don't necessarily come in thinking about money that way. But it helps a lot if you change your mindset and think that there is abundance and that there's enough for everybody, and and that it's sort of like it builds upon itself.
The other thing is that pensions are not your retirement. Pensions are not
anymore.
Here in the United States, pensions are not enough for you to actually live a decent life. Like, pensions are just,
well, the people
terrible.
who can have a pension will have enough, but the pension is disappearing. That's the issue.
Yes.
Not really. I mean,
because there's a difference between like a 401k and having a pension from your job. People who still have access to pension.
I don't consider a 401k a pension. That's actually like an extra investment that you need to do besides what the government is going to
or
give you.
Or are you talking about the Social Security, which is not a pension?
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, that's
because
like
I'm thinking about people who
has.
Because I think that there are people who still earn a pension with their companies, and that is very different than having what you will receive from Social Security.
Yes.
Right. So it's like what you receive from the government will not be enough. So you need to have another plan of action if you want to retire and not burden your kids with your care or living with you or whatever. If you actually or you actually want to have a decent retirement, you need to do something else. You need to buy some property. You need to invest in 401k. You need to invest in the stock market, mutual funds, whatever it is that you need to do. You need to do something different, because just paying your taxes and paying your Social Security will not be enough.
Yeah.
I mean, in Europe it may be, but not here.
Definitely not here. Just to clarify, Social Security is definitely not the same thing as a pension, and most companies don't have pension plans anymore. I think that maybe if you have a government job, you may still be able to access a pension. If you're a teacher, maybe, depending on your state and your school district and whatnot. But yeah, pensions are really, really difficult to come by these days. Definitely not something our generation will ever receive, most likely. It's more like people who have already retired or maybe are very close to retiring now. So we have to, like you said, Clem, we have to think about other ways to break that cycle, right? Because otherwise it's just not going to happen for us anymore. And so I think that there are different ways and many different things that you can do. And people usually tend to be a little bit fearful of those as well. But investing is something that culturally, Latinos don't necessarily, it's not something that's top of mind or their first instinct to invest, right? People feel like my mother-in-law, I still hear her say things like, jugar en la bolsa. Like, no, you're not. It's not a gamble. It's an investment. It's not the same thing. So, if we've been hearing that from our parents all along, we're like, oh no, it's dangerous. I'm going to lose all my money. But there are so many different ways and more conservative ways to invest in the stock market. So that's by far, if you understand the concept of compound interest and you really ingrain it in you and in your children, then you realize that investing in the stock market is a must. And then there's real estate, which is something that many people in the Latino culture are a lot more comfortable with. And it's definitely something that we should try to do. I usually urge people to think of real estate as an investment. Like I said, not your family home that you're always going to keep forever necessarily, depending on your situation and where you're starting from. But real estate is a great way to build up towards greater wealth for the next generations. And then owning a business is also a great way to, hand something down to your children. In many cases, sadly, the kids will not necessarily want to continue that business, but it's still okay because that business has a value and you can sell it. And then when you're ready to retire, you take some of that money, you keep it for yourself, and then maybe there's more to give to your kids and get them started on their own business, whatever business it is that they want to pursue. Another super important way to break the cycle is to avoid debt, right? Debt is something it's a big burden, and many times you carry it with you for so long and you just don't know how to break the cycle. So really avoiding debt is
sometimes kids inherit debt. If their parents pass away, they inherit that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And so that's something that we really, if we're thinking of the next generation and leaving something, a legacy behind, debt is one of the first things that you need to tackle. And something that people don't talk about too much, but I think it's key, is just earning more money. Diversifying your sources of income. You know, if you have a full-time job, you can probably still find other ways to make money on the side, especially these days, you know, with like gig economy and being able to freelance and being able to do so many things. You can be resourceful, find other ways to earn additional income, and that can be a way to supplement the money that comes in. You can use it to pay debt, or after you've paid off your debt, you can use it to invest. However, you know, you choose to invest, whatever you're comfortable with. Another issue I think that many of the Latinos in this country have is that we are supporting family back home. And so that makes it really difficult for the people who are living here to break the cycle, because you're earning a lot more than you probably would in your home country, but if a chunk of that is going back home, then, you know, that doesn't leave you with much to invest or to, you know, pay off your debt. So that's a tough one. Go ahead.
I do want to say something, though, about that last point. Well, you're right about that. I do know a lot of people who their investment is to build a home, to build a business back home, and that their plan is to retire, and that they do. I know a lot of indigenous people in Guatemala, a lot of working class people who are maybe even undocumented here and having very tough lives here, who have like very much lifted their families from poverty at their own home countries. So that, once again, and for me, for example, and I think I've shared these for a long time, like as someone who thinks post-capitalism, I always think that another option would be to organize so that we don't have to spend every minute that we have working in gig economy or anything else. Like what we want to is to have a more dignified salary and to have options in which we can spend free our time, which is the only limited resource not the only, there is planetary boundaries to how we live and consume in the United States, which are also problematic. And there's also the issue about housing insecurity, which are many other issues. But like, I think that organizing to look for, you know, economic justice for our communities is also very important, so that we can think of alternatives.
This is something that we talked about in another episode about how Latinas make the least amount of money, you know, per dollar in any demographic and per any genre. So yes, definitely that. But it's like, okay, so what do we do? Like, that's a long-term thing. That would be awesome to do. It will happen at some point. We will make it happen. But what can we do now? Like,
generational wealth is a long-term.
Well, I mean, if you're in your 50s and you have kids, like, not really. You know, you got like maybe 15, 20 more years to, you know, get that going. And actually, you know, and so it's kind of like, you know, you gotta put your money to work right now. Like the time, you know, this is what I always heard. The time to start saving for retirement is now. Like, don't wait.
Always.
Like, don't wait until you're like whatever. Now. You're 25 now.
You're
18
now.
or if you think it's too late, now. No matter where you are.
Even when you said if you're 50 and you still have 20 years, like 20 years is still a longer term than 3 or 2 years or 5 years. It's still a long term. Like, you cannot go into the market in investing like you would at the risks that you would take when you are 25. Because that is what makes, like, when you say, when your mother-in-law saying jugar a la bolsa, when there's people who gamble and are speculators on the stock market every day. If you invest in the market, you are playing the long game. You are making a strategy with someone who will take your risk, who will think of what you have, and who will look at what you can afford to lose. Because it is a long game.
My very first full-time job, I was 21. And I got offered a 401k, and I said no. I was like, no, I need this money right now, because I don't have enough to pay for my rent and my car and my food and, you know, my student loans. So I was like, no 401k for me. So then time went by, and I actually never got a 401k. you know? And so it's kind of like, you know, time goes by and then you keep thinking I'm just gonna do it eventually when, you know, everything kind of evens out, when I pay my student loans, when I do this, when I do that, and then you have a kid and then it's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't happen. So it's like, yeah, it's a long game, but like, when do you start? Like, and you know, it's worrying. It's like, I ended up like being 35 and just being terrified, like, oh my God, I don't have a retirement plan.
Yep. And if you're always thinking that next paycheck is never gonna be the one where you finally decide to take a chunk of that money. But you know, sometimes I also think that is just a sign of you need to earn more money. A lot of times it is the reality. It's difficult to hear it. It's really, really difficult to hear it, but you can only like limit your expenses and limit yourself so much. So that's why I said, I know, you know, I'm definitely not promoting like working 24/7. I'm not. I'm just, what I'm promoting is really like working smarter. You know, if you need to move to a job that pays you more, look for it. If you are not being paid the rates that you should get paid because you're undocumented, there's a lot you can do about it. Like, your status doesn't really mean that you get to earn less money, you know, that your work is worth less than other people. You can advocate for yourself, and there are organizations that, you know, where they can help you do it. If you work for yourself, then you need to make sure that you are either making the most of your time or, you know, charging a rate that is what you need to live. So prioritizing your income is really, really super important. So that you're not in that place where you're always like, oh, I can't afford to save for my retirement, because you need to make it one of your top goals.
Priorities, yeah. And also, you know, going back to the people that are supporting people back home, I mean, of course, there's you know, there's people in Venezuela like that you know, their families are here and they're sending them money because it's just like, what else can you do, you know? But you know, there's also,
but it's all through Latin America.
Yeah, yes. That was just an example. Yeah. You know, I have lots of, you know, friends and family here that, you know, have families back home, and they're sending them money whenever somebody gets sick, or to pay for a funeral, or, you know, to help pay for a down payment, or, you know, to put somebody through school. You know, there's so many different examples, of course. And you know, we want to do as much as possible. But, you know, I don't know if you guys have this experience, but it's like, you know, most people that, you know, live back in Latin America and have never been here, and they kind of think that, you know, people that live here are like very wealthy, and, you know, and their families are really wealthy people. And it's like, the amount of work that we have to do to send that money back home is extraordinary. And it's like really hard earned money. You know, some people are breaking their backs to do that. And so
I think also there is a disconnect sometimes between what the families go through here and what the families back home, like if they are lifted and they have can access, how they might have a sensation. And also I think it's a matter of pride in how people relate to money. And we talked about a little bit about this feeling of how we relate to money. Do we really tell our families how difficult it is, the things that you're going without here? Because you don't want, you know, if you're having a difficult time, but
you don't want to worry
your work,
them.
you can lift. You don't want to worry them. So so that's the complexities of our community have to endure every day, right? Because there is a myriad of experiences as their individuals in multiple situations as they come here.
Yeah.
I do have to say, Ceci, I'd like to go back to your comment about that retirement plan of earning money here and buying a home back either in your home country or another country. And I think that's a wonderful plan. I think these days it's so expensive. You know, it's like the people, I live in LA, and it's like the people who have moved. So many people have moved out of LA, and they're now living in many other states because life is just much more affordable elsewhere. If you find yourself in your 50s, 60s, and you realize that you don't really have enough money to retire in this country, so many people do it. Even like
Americans.
American-born people, yeah, exactly. They move to other countries because that's where they can afford to live. And you can live a much better quality of life in these countries. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think it's a great idea and it's a good plan. You know, you have to be careful, of course. You have to make sure that whoever is maintaining your home over there is, you know, it's not going to be an issue. Yeah. And if you rent it out while you don't live there, all those things you have to think about. Yeah. But it is a great plan.
There's one thing that I want to add, and this is something that, you know, my parents experienced when they were thinking about retirement. Your health insurance, you know, if you go and retire after a certain age, there's no social security for you, like social security, health insurance, like government supported health insurance, there will not be, because you're over a certain age. So you have to make sure that you secure like a private health insurance, but you should secure it before you turn a certain age, because some health insurances in like Latin America won't take people over a certain age. So, you know, if you're back home, you're going to have to pay out of pocket if you have a surgery or something like that. And as you get older, obviously, the, you know, health insurance needs to kick in more and more. So, you know, if you are planning on moving back home with, whenever you retire, make sure that you take care of the health insurance before your retirement age, and make sure that you have it. So when you move back there, you have a way to get healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. And health and wealth are so intertwined, because so many people don't have enough money to cover a health emergency in their, they don't have enough savings to cover a health emergency. And so that always sets people back a lot if you find yourself in that situation. So even if you're not thinking about retirement just yet, you do have to take care of your health, so that when you reach that point in your life, you don't have all these health situations that start to pop up with age, right? If you take care of yourself now, then when you reach that point in your life, you will be stronger. And if you need to work longer, or, like semi-retirement, that's also another option for many people, semi-retirement. If you need to work a little bit longer, you are strong enough and healthy enough to be able to do it. I think, speaking of semi-retirement, I do think that that's also a good option. A lot of times, you have to get creative and resourceful with these things. But if your goal is to create that generational wealth, or at least to allow your kids to, be free to grow their money without having to worry about supporting you, then yeah, semi-retirement or like gradual retirement is a good option.
Yeah, you can start a business back home, back in your country of origin, if you're a first generation or if you're an immigrant, or you can consult, you can work part-time wherever you retire from, things like that. Or you can teach, you can teach in like a college. There's so many things that you can do. And obviously, like, for example, my father was like, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to retire and just like not do anything. Like, I actually want to do something. So he's been like, teaching. He's been like, doing a bunch of the consulting and things like that, just because like he wants to, so there's that too.
I think it's important for mental health, for people who have been actively and intellectually engaged for years, suddenly find themselves with, I think everyone dreams about having all this extra free time, but once you find yourself, I know my mom, after retiring from being a teacher for many years, for 2 decades, there was a period in which she was adrift and needed to kind of find, like, it was almost like, after waking up at a certain time, and like she got a very structured schedule, like, with any kid in the school, probably teachers do. But after that retirement process, like finding what to do with her time, and she is, had a pension, so has a pension. So it's those benefits from like what it meant for us to think of societally as like, how do we take care of our elders in a way in which we, I don't think, have really have moved away from. And for me, that's something that I dedicate my time to, like advocating and thinking, exploring what does it mean to actually building a society community, amongst all of us, in which we can have economic justice, in which we didn't if we didn't have to worry about building our individual health from our individual wealth for our individual families, what would it look like to know that as a society we would be taken care of from the moment we're children to the moment we're elderly, and knowing that the next generation will be okay.
Yeah. I mean, we pay taxes religiously all the time, and it all goes away into some war instead of coming back to us, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we have put in so much work and effort into this country, and it's like, are they going to take care of us?
Most likely not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, like, this is, it sucks. But this is why we're talking about this. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to work with what we got? Because we have been dealt a kind of crappy hand here. We pay our taxes, and it's like, oh, they're supposed to be, put to work in like certain things. No, the grand majority of it goes to wars and the military.
That's our budget. More than 52% cents per every dollar. More than that.
So, So anyway,
I think that's why it kind of has to be a two-way thing, right? It has to be, you have to think about yourself, but you also have to think about the people that are coming next, so that it snowballs. So yeah, of course you have to think about yourself. You have to take care of that side of it. But also the other side of the equation is modeling good behavior and having a more of a long-term mindset so that you can teach your kids how to prepare from an early age.
Yeah, not wait until. But no, we got to think about it now and talk about it now.
Yeah,
with our families.
You mentioned something that was, like you mentioned how when you started your work, someone told you, offer you 401k, and you said no. You had like your reasons why, very valid ones. My experience was that I have for my first job in the United States a 401k that then went into an IRA because I worked in a bank, and my manager, which had a very young teller line, was like, I want all of you to start contributing as much as the bank will contribute, because if you don't, that's leaving money on the table. So that was a different kind of perspective of saying, oh, if I contribute 1 or 2 or 3% or whatever that could be, the bank was going to match it. And if we didn't contribute, that was leaving money on the table, which was a very different idea. So I think like mentoring, talking about these things, like, Lucia, you're saying, what are our attitudes? How do we feel about money? Are we intimidated about money? How do we understand the system as we begin to play it with different rules and different situations? It's important. And I think that that mentoring, or as we grow into different roles, or we have the capacity to talk to other generations, what has worked for us, what hasn't worked, to have the ability to share those experiences, because we don't talk about money still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just little things, like teaching people who are younger that you can get, that your employer could match your contributions. Many people don't understand that. Even when they get to their first job, they either don't understand it or nobody tells them. So it's like, doesn't even cross their mind. Another thing, I'm glad we're talking about retirement accounts and jobs, because another thing that happens a lot more than you would ever imagine is, so you have your first job, you start saving money in the 401k, and then you move on to another job and you leave that 401k there. And people never roll it over either to an IRA or to their new job's 401k. And so many people, again, this is another case where you leave money on the table. They've been saving, maybe they were really young. I did it in my first job.
I didn't know that you could do that.
But it's still there waiting for you.
I think I shouldn't even be in the situation, but I think I rolled it over at some point. Yes. I'm not entirely sure. It wasn't a ton of money, and I tried. I remember
compound interest,
reaching out and like trying, and I think I ended up transferring it. But you know, I was young. I was really saving like very, very little from each paycheck. But it is true. People don't roll it over, and so, you know, it's their first, second job. They don't think it's a significant amount of money. They end up staying in another job for a long period of time. And so they just think of those savings that they have there, and you end up missing out on what could be a good amount of money.
And that's super important to think about, because, you know, nowadays people don't really stay at their jobs for 20 years, you know, where you build out this huge 401k or whatever. Like, you keep moving from job to job is normal. You know, that's how this economy in this country is working. So we do need to think about, like, how are we going to keep, and also life insurance. If you get the life insurance from the job that they offer you, this like life insurance, it goes away when you start working for another company. So you might as well get an external life insurance where you can put your money there, so it doesn't have to depend on your job. Yeah, it's great to have it from your job, but once you move on to another job, it's done, and then you have to start over. Or, you know, and maybe in the other job, they don't offer life insurance. So it's kind of like, you know, do that externally.
I think the key is... I'm sorry.
I was just going to say something before we move away from the contributing to IRAs or 401ks. Also, it helps you avoid... It also reduces the amount of taxes you pay, because you usually pay them before, you know, like it reduces kind of like your income. So if you contribute, even though it feels like, oh, I can't do it, it ends up saving you money.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. Actually, what I was going to say kind of goes along with this is I think the key is to know how financial instruments work, right? They're tools. So you need to know how to use them. You need to know how to use a 401k, how to get that matching gift from your employer, how long you have to stay at that job to actually take that money with you, because a lot of employers have limitations. Like if you leave in under a year or maybe under 2 years, you know, if you have a job and you get stock, for example, if it's a big company and you get stock, you won't necessarily take that with you unless you stay there for like 4 or 5 years. And then, so you need to know, for example, the difference between a 401k and an IRA. How much can you actually, if you've maxed out your 401k, if you're in that amazing situation, say you're young, you don't have a lot of financial responsibilities, you can max out your 401k, but guess what? You might still be able to put money into an IRA as well and save money on taxes. So it's money that you are setting aside for yourself, and you're saving money on taxes. So yeah, all of these things, you just, if you learn the basics of a financial education, you learn how to use the tools better to your advantage, which again, a lot of times, either culturally or they don't teach it at school, you just don't know what you don't know, and you're missing out.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, but I do want to mention this one important thing that we talked about as we were, preparing for this topic is, what about if you haven't held a job in your life? What if you were a stay-at-home mom?
Ways to build generational wealth. If you're a stay-at-home mom, okay. Well, first of all, I would say, talk to your kids about it, right? Talk to your kids so that they can start preparing, because we're thinking generationally. If you have never built, I would say it's never too late to start. If you need to start making money, you should.
I would say that you are participant to the wealth your partner has accrued during those years, because you made it possible for them to go out. We spoke about this in the previous conversation with Lucia about the value of housework. Like if both people work, and let's say you hire someone to come and help you with domestic work, or you hire someone to help you with daycare, everyone who pays daycare out there knows how expensive it is. So that has a value. So if you are if you are in a relationship or never worked, but you took care of children and you maintain the household, you are and have the right, and you can earn the pension and the social security of your spouse. even if you, I think, if you were a stay-at-home partner.
Yeah, you've been working,
but you are a contributor and a facilitator of that partner earning that financial income, and you should be receive the benefits of it.
Absolutely. And I was thinking more along the lines of like, if you find yourself in a situation where you are suddenly responsible excuse me, for the family finances, right? And you're not sure how to handle it. I would say in that case, get help. Talk to somebody that you trust, find an advisor, and, figure out ways to protect what you have so that you can continue to grow it and just, use money wisely.
Yeah. I mean, if you are a person who has been a stay-at-home mom or dad, and you find yourself that you've lost your partner, listen to the episode that we just did, and talks about learning about finances and learning to get a handle of it, and not letting just your partner handle the finances all the time. You can do it too. I mean, I remember I have an aunt who lost her husband 4 years ago, and it took us like a whole year to figure out all the finances of all the investments that he had, and she had no idea, and it was painful for her children, for her, and so it's important to start now. When's the time to start learning about finances? Now. When's the time to start about retirement? Now. And with that,
that's a key message. Now.
Yeah, exactly. Now. Just start now. And with
because
that,
compound interest is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yes. Also, empowerment, and empower yourself. When you are knowledgeable, you are empowered. And when you make decisions with, your family about money, you are empowered. So this is all about, helping people grow and helping people get empowered, and to help people make more decisions about themselves and not letting others make decisions for them.
And
yes,
Lucia, don't forget to share with us if you have like newsletter, blogs, or other avenues in which you share your knowledge so that people can reach out, like find out.
Yes, we will share them on social media.
Yeah.
Mine personally?
Yeah, like, it doesn't have to be like right now. I know we'll share it with the resources for the episode, but I think it's important, like, you dedicate your time and your life to do some of this work of like writing about this.
So even if it's you or someone that you love reading or any other resource, we'll be happy to share it on our social media.
Yes, I'm not that good about my social media, but I will get better. That's one of my things. One of my goals for this year.
It's always great to have goals. All right, so thank you so much, guys. This was super. I mean, I learned a bunch of things, and I'm like this old fart here. So thank you. So thank you for teaching me stuff in las chancletas y todo. So I hope that you guys like this episode. We work really hard to put this information together for you guys. This is all for you. So please let us know if you like it. Our new social media handles are Chancleta Generation, except for Twitter, which is Chancleta Gen, because they have like this like character limit. So you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces. And if you like this podcast, just give us a rating, share it with your friends,
leave a review, leave us some
it.
comments.
Yeah, and also let us know what else you want us to do some deep dives into. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was a pleasure.
See you guys next week.
See you next week, mi amor.